Jennifer Morrison kept every drawing her kindergarten students gave her, taping them to her refrigerator until there was no white space left, then starting on the walls. In November 1987, the 26-year-old teacher disappeared after parent-teacher conferences at Riverside Elementary in Holland, Michigan. She left behind 73 children's drawings, a classroom with empty bookshelves where she'd planned to add new titles, and a mother who would spend the next 36 years searching for a daughter who never came home. For 36 years, Jennifer's mother, Ruth, kept those refrigerator drawings exactly as they were, the tape yellowing, the corners curling. She couldn't bring herself to take them down. Then, in October 2023, a cold case detective named Marcus Webb pulled Jennifer's file from storage and sent DNA evidence for genealogical analysis. The results pointed to someone who had helped search for Jennifer, someone who had stood beside the family during their darkest hours, holding their hands and promising never to stop looking. The betrayal would prove that sometimes the cruelest monsters wear the mask of compassion. This is a story about how trust can become a weapon. It's about Jennifer's dream of teaching children to love reading, the same dream that kept her at school late that November evening. And it's about a mother who refused to let her daughter become a statistic, who fought for answers when the world moved on, and who finally, after more than 3 decades, heard the truth that shattered and vindicated her in the same breath. If you value stories like this and want to see more investigations into cold cases that were finally solved, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Also, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Please write your country in the comments below. Let's see how far around the world these stories travel. The discovery came on a gray October morning in 2023, the kind of morning when Lake Michigan looks like liquid steel and the wind carries the promise of early snow. Detective Marcus Webb had been with the Holland Police Department for 11 years, but he'd only been assigned to the cold case unit for 6 months. His captain had made it clear, this wasn't a promotion. It was where they sent detectives who cared too much, who took cases home in their heads, who couldn't learn to let go. Marcus had spent 3 years investigating a missing teenager, working nights and weekends, until his marriage dissolved, and his captain sat him down with concern in his eyes. The cold case unit was supposed to be different. The cases were old. The families had learned to live with uncertainty. There was no pressure, no media, no expectation of miracles. But Marcus couldn't do anything halfway. That was his gift and his curse. He found Jennifer Morrison's file in a cardboard box marked 1987, wedged between a burglary case and an assault. The folder was thin, just 43 pages for a woman's entire disappearance. That bothered him immediately. 43 pages meant the investigation had stalled quickly, meant leads had dried up, meant the department had moved on. Inside the folder was a photograph. Jennifer Morrison at 26, smiling at the camera with her whole face, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes and crinkles the corners. She wore a blue sweater and had her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Behind her, Marcus could see a classroom wall covered in construction paper turkeys and pilgrims. November, the photo caption said, taken 2 weeks before she disappeared. Marcus studied the photo for a long time. He'd learned over the years that you had to fall a little bit in love with the victim. Not romantically, that wasn't it. But you had to care about them as a person, had to see them as more than a case number. You had to imagine them alive, laughing, dreaming, being annoying or charming or both. You had to want them found, not because it was your job, but because they mattered. Looking at Jennifer's smile, Marcus thought about his own kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who had taught him to read and had told him he was smart when his father said he was slow. He thought about the teachers who'd seen something in him worth nurturing. Jennifer Morrison had been one of those teachers. 73 kids in her classroom over the years, each one carrying some piece of her forward. He opened the incident report. Jennifer had last been seen leaving Riverside Elementary at 8:47 p.m. on November 19, 1987. She'd stayed late for parent-teacher conferences. The janitor, Paul Hendricks, had been the last person to see her, walking to her car in the parking lot. She'd waved to him. Her blue Chevrolet Cavalier had been found 3 days later in a rest stop parking lot 40 miles away, keys in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat. Everything seemingly normal, except Jennifer herself was gone. The case had gone cold within weeks. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no body. The prevailing theory at the time was that Jennifer had been abducted by a transient, someone passing through. The investigation had focused on known sex offenders in the area, on drifters, on anyone with a record. They'd found nothing. But Marcus had learned something in his 11 years as a detective. When a woman disappears and you can't find evidence of a stranger's involvement, the answer is almost always closer to home. Someone she knew, someone she trusted. He started making a list of everyone in Jennifer's life in November 1987. Her mother, Ruth. Her father, Dale, who had died in 2003. Her younger sister, Amy. Her colleagues at Riverside Elementary. Her friends, the parents of her students, the janitor who saw her last. And then, because this was a cold case and DNA technology had transformed criminal investigation, Marcus pulled the evidence boxes from storage. There wasn't much. Jennifer's car had been processed, but this was 1987. DNA analysis was still in its infancy, and what they'd collected was minimal. But there was one item that made Marcus pause. A coffee cup from Jennifer's car, found on the floor of the passenger side. The original report noted it was from a local diner, Morrison's family restaurant. No relation to Jennifer despite the name. The cup had been tested for fingerprints in 1987, but had yielded nothing useful. Too smudged. But it had never been tested for DNA. Why would it have been? In 1987, DNA profiling had just been introduced to criminal investigation. The technology was new, expensive, unreliable. But it was 2023 now. Everything had changed. Marcus submitted the coffee cup for DNA analysis, along with several other items from the evidence box: cigarette butts found near where Jennifer's car was discovered, fibers from the car's upholstery, everything they had. It was a long shot. DNA degraded over time. Contamination was always a concern. But he had to try. While he waited for results, and the lab had warned him it could take months, Marcus did what good detectives do. He started talking to people. Ruth Morrison was 79 years old when Marcus knocked on her door. She lived in the same house where Jennifer had grown up, a modest ranch-style home in a neighborhood where all the houses looked similar, where kids still rode bikes in the street and neighbors knew each other's names. Ruth answered the door with the wariness of someone who had been disappointed many times. Her hair was white now, cut short and practical. She wore a cardigan despite the mild October weather, the kind of careful layering that elderly people do, always prepared for cold. "Mrs. Morrison?" Marcus held up his badge. "I'm Detective Marcus Webb. I'd like to talk to you about Jennifer." Something flickered in Ruth's eyes. Hope? Fear? After 36 years, Marcus imagined those emotions had become inseparable. "You're new," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. I recently took over the cold case unit. The others stopped coming years ago." Ruth's voice was matter of fact, but Marcus heard the hurt underneath. "I know. I'm sorry for that." Ruth studied him for a long moment. then stepped aside. "You want coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." The house was exactly what Marcus expected. Clean, dated, comfortable. The furniture was from another era, probably purchased in the early 80s and maintained carefully ever since. But what caught his attention was the refrigerator. It was covered in children's drawings, just like the file had mentioned. Turkeys made from traced hands, crayon portraits of stick figure families, a house with a too big sun and flowers taller than people. The tape holding them had turned brown with age, and the paper had faded to softer versions of their original colors, but they were all there. "I can't take them down," Ruth said, following his gaze. She poured coffee into 2 mugs, her hand steady. "Dale, my husband, he wanted me to. Said it wasn't healthy. But what does healthy even mean when your daughter is missing? What's the right way to grieve someone who might still be alive?" She handed Marcus a mug and sat at the kitchen table. Marcus sat across from her, notebook ready, but not yet open. Sometimes you just had to listen. "For the first 10 years, I thought she might come back," Ruth continued. "I really believed it. I thought maybe she'd lost her memory, or maybe someone was holding her and she'd escape, or maybe she'd just walked away, started a new life somewhere. I used to imagine her in California, teaching at a school by the ocean, happy but unable to contact us for some reason I couldn't quite figure out. And after 10 years? After 10 years, I knew she was dead." Ruth said it simply, without crying, like someone who had shed all possible tears long ago. "I knew someone had taken her from us, but I still needed to know who. I still needed to understand why. I still needed—" She paused, picking up her coffee but not drinking it. "I needed her to matter, not just to me, but to the world. I needed people to care that Jennifer Morrison existed, that she was a good person, that she deserved justice." Marcus opened his notebook. "Tell me about her. Not about the disappearance. About Jennifer." And Ruth did. She told him about Jennifer as a little girl, always organizing elaborate games with the neighborhood kids, always the one making sure everyone got a turn and nobody felt left out. She told him about Jennifer in high school, volunteering at the library on weekends, teaching elderly people how to use the new card catalog system. She told him about Jennifer in college at Grand Valley State, majoring in education, because she'd known since she was 8 years old that teaching was her calling. She wasn't perfect, Ruth said, and Marcus appreciated that. The families who made their loved ones saints were harder to investigate. You couldn't get to the truth through hagiography. She was stubborn. Once she decided something, you couldn't change her mind, and she could be impractical. She'd spend her whole paycheck on books for her classroom, then not have money for groceries. I had to keep her stocked on canned soup. Was she seeing anyone? Dating? Not seriously. She dated a few men over the years, but nothing stuck. She always said she was married to her job. 26 years old, and she acted like a mother already, to those 73 kindergartners. She knew all their names, all their parents' names, which ones had allergies, which ones needed extra attention. When kids from her class saw her at the grocery store, they'd run to her like she was a celebrity. What about the night she disappeared? Did she seem worried about anything? Scared? Ruth shook her head. That's what made it so terrible. It was just a normal night. Parent-teacher conferences, like she did every fall and spring. She'd called me around 7, took a break between conferences to check in. She was in good spirits, said the meetings were going well, said she'd be home by 9:30. She lived here? With you? Yes. She was saving money for her own place. But you know how expensive everything was becoming even then. She had the basement apartment, her own entrance, her own space, but still close. I liked having her here. After Dale had his first heart attack in '85, it made me feel better knowing she was nearby. Marcus made notes, trying to build a timeline. So she called at 7. The janitor saw her leaving at 8:47. That's almost 2 hours. Do you know what she was doing in between? The last parent conference was scheduled for 7:30. It should have ended around 8. Maybe they ran long, or maybe Jennifer was cleaning up her classroom. She always stayed to straighten up, couldn't stand leaving a mess. Who was the last parent conference with? Do you remember? Ruth's expression changed, became carefully neutral. Tom Hendricks. His son Kevin was in Jennifer's class. Tom Hendricks? Marcus looked at his notes. Any relation to Paul Hendricks, the janitor? His brother. Paul was the one who saw Jennifer last. Tom was the last parent she met with. Ruth's voice had gone flat. The police looked at both of them in 1987, questioned them multiple times, but they had alibis for later that night, and there was no evidence connecting them to Jennifer's disappearance. There was something in the way Ruth said it that made Marcus lean forward. But you suspected them? I suspected everyone. Ruth met his eyes. That's what this does to you. It turns you paranoid. Every man who'd ever spoken to Jennifer became a potential killer in my mind. Her principal, her fellow teachers, the mailman, the man who delivered oil to the house. For years, I'd lie awake at night running through scenarios, trying to figure out who and how and why. Did you ever come to any conclusions? Ruth was quiet for a long moment. There was someone who helped with the search. David Chen. He was so dedicated, so kind. He organized search parties, printed flyers, called tips into the police. He was there for us constantly those first few months. He held my hand at the press conference when I begged for information. He told me he wouldn't rest until we found Jennifer. But Marcus could hear the but coming. But he knew things he shouldn't have known. Little details about Jennifer, what she'd been wearing that night, which classroom was hers, what kind of car she drove, things that hadn't been in the news reports. When I mentioned it to the detective working the case, he said David had probably picked up those details from talking to people, from being involved in the search. But it always bothered me. Marcus wrote the name down, underlining it twice. Is David Chen still in the area? I don't know. He stopped coming around after maybe 6 months. Said the case was taking a toll on his mental health, that he needed to step back. I never heard from him again. Ruth's voice carried an old bitterness. Everyone moved on eventually. The search parties stopped. The news stopped calling. Even the police stopped updating me. Jennifer became another cold case, another name on a list. Not anymore, Marcus said. I've submitted DNA evidence for analysis. If there's anything there, we'll find it. Ruth looked at him with eyes that had seen too many promises broken. Detective Webb, I'm 79 years old. I don't have the energy for hope anymore. Then I'll hope for both of us. Marcus spent the rest of the day in the station's archives, pulling boxes and reading reports. He found transcripts of interviews from 1987, witness statements, tips that had been called in. The investigation had been thorough at the time. The detectives hadn't been lazy or incompetent. They'd done everything they could with the tools available. But they hadn't had DNA analysis. They hadn't had genetic genealogy. They hadn't had the database systems that now connected millions of profiles across the country. Marcus found the interview transcripts for David Chen. In November 1987, Chen had been 34 years old. an accountant who lived 15 miles away in Grand Rapids. He'd told police he'd seen the news about Jennifer's disappearance and felt compelled to help. He'd organized search parties through his church, led volunteers through the woods and fields around Holland, distributed flyers at shopping centers and rest stops. The detective's notes from 1987 showed that Chen had been cooperative, had voluntarily submitted to questioning, had provided an alibi for the night of November 19th. He'd been at a work dinner until 10 p.m. with multiple witnesses. His involvement in the search had been seen as admirable, not suspicious. But Ruth's comment nagged at Marcus. The details Chen had known. What had they been exactly? He dug deeper into the files, looking for any red flags, and then he found it. A note from a detective dated December 8, 1987. David Chen called tip line reporting he'd seen a blue Chevrolet Cavalier near the I-196 rest stop around 9:30 p.m. on November 19th. Caller said he'd been driving home from Grand Rapids and noticed the car because his own sister drove the same model. Vehicle description matches Jennifer Morrison's car. However, Morrison's car was not publicly identified as a Cavalier until December 1st press conference. When asked how he knew the make and model, Chen said he must have heard it from another volunteer. Follow-up scheduled. But there was no follow-up report in the file. The lead had died there, one observation in a sea of dead ends. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was something. It might be nothing. Chen could have genuinely heard about the car from another volunteer or seen it mentioned somewhere, but it might be everything. He pulled Chen's contact information from the 1987 file and started searching. David Chen would be 70 now. A lot could change in 36 years. People moved, changed names, died. It took Marcus 3 days to locate him. David Chen still lived in Michigan, but he'd moved north to Traverse City. He'd retired from accounting in 2015. He'd never married, no criminal record. From the outside, a quiet, ordinary life. Marcus called Chen's number. The phone rang 6 times before someone answered. Hello? The voice was older, careful. Mr. Chen, this is Detective Marcus Webb with the Holland Police Department. I'm calling about an old case you were involved in, the disappearance of Jennifer Morrison in 1987. There was a pause. Then, that was a long time ago. Yes, sir, it was. I'm reviewing the case with fresh eyes, and I wanted to ask you a few questions if you have time. Another pause. I'm not sure what I can tell you that I didn't tell the police back then. Sometimes people remember things later, details that didn't seem important at the time. Would you be willing to talk with me? I could drive up to Traverse City, meet you somewhere convenient. I don't think that's necessary. Like I said, it was a long time ago. I barely remember the details anymore. Marcus kept his voice friendly, casual. I understand.
Just one quick question then. How did you know Jennifer Morrison drove a Chevrolet Cavalier before that information was made public? The silence on the other end was different now. Weighted. I don't remember saying that. It's in the case file. You called the tip line on December 8, 1987, reporting you'd seen her car at a rest stop on the night she disappeared. But her car hadn't been publicly identified as a Cavalier until December 1st. So how did you know? Detective, are you accusing me of something? No, sir. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. It's probably just a miscommunication in the old reports. That's why I'd like to talk in person, to clear things up. I don't have anything to clear up, and I don't appreciate being harassed about something that happened when I was trying to help. I have nothing more to say. The line went dead. Marcus sat back in his chair, adrenaline coursing through him. That wasn't the response of someone with nothing to hide. That was the response of someone who was afraid. He called the lab that was processing the DNA evidence. "I need a rush on the Morrison case samples," he said. "And I need you to run the results through every database you have access to. CODIS, genealogical services, everything." "That's going to be expensive," the lab technician said. "I don't care. Send the bill to the department. This is priority 1. While Marcus waited for DNA results, he drove to Traverse City anyway. If David Chen wouldn't talk to him, maybe Chen's neighbors would. Maybe his former colleagues. Maybe someone who knew him would remember something useful. But first, Marcus did something he always did when he got close to solving a case. He drove back to Ruth Morrison's house and sat in his car outside, just looking at it. He needed to remember why he was doing this. Not for the closure statistics that made his captain happy. Not for the commendations or the press conferences, but for the woman inside that house who'd been waiting 36 years for someone to care enough. He knocked on Ruth's door. She answered with the same wariness, but this time there was a flicker of something else. Hope, maybe, or fear of hope. "Detective Webb, it's late." "I know, Mrs. Morrison. I'm sorry. I wanted you to know I'm getting close. I can feel it. And I wanted to ask you something." Ruth stepped aside, let him in. They sat at the kitchen table again, in the same chairs. The drawings were still on the refrigerator. Marcus wondered if they'd still be there when this was all over. "What did you want to ask?" "Tell me about the day Jennifer was born. Not the disappearance. Not the tragedy. The beginning." Ruth looked surprised. Then her face softened in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. "Why do you want to know that?" "Because when I find who did this, and I will find them, I want to know exactly what they took from the world. I want to understand the full measure of the loss." Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Then she started talking. "Jennifer was born on April 12, 1961. Spring morning, everything blooming. I'd had a long labor, 18 hours. Dale was terrified, thought he was going to lose me. But when they put Jennifer in my arms, she looked right at me. I swear she did. Newborns can't really see that well, but Jennifer looked at me like she knew me already, like we'd been waiting for each other." Ruth smiled at the memory. She was a happy baby. Hardly ever cried. Just watched everything, taking it all in. By 6 months, she was laughing at everything. Her father's silly faces, the cat walking by, leaves moving in the wind. She found joy in the smallest things. "When did you know she'd be a teacher?" "She was 8. We were at the grocery store, and she saw a little boy crying. His mother was trying to calm him down, getting frustrated. Jennifer walked right up to them. I tried to stop her, but she was determined, and she said to the boy, 'Did you know that when you're sad, your body is just trying to tell you something important? It's okay to cry. It means you're paying attention.' The mother looked at Jennifer like she was some kind of angel, and the boy stopped crying, just like that." Ruth's eyes glistened. That was Jennifer. She had this way of seeing people, really seeing them, making them feel understood. I knew then she'd do something with that gift. Teaching just made sense. Did she ever doubt it? Ever think about doing something else? Once, in college, she had a boyfriend who wanted her to move to Chicago with him, work in his father's business. She seriously considered it. But then she did her student teaching, and she came home glowing. Said, "Mom, I found my people. Kids just make sense to me in a way adults don't. They're honest. They're learning who they are. I want to help them figure that out." The boyfriend didn't last. Teaching did. Marcus wrote it all down, even though he'd never need these notes for the case. He needed them for himself. To remember that Jennifer Morrison wasn't a case file or a cold body or a DNA sample. She was a woman who'd laughed at leaves moving in the wind and saw kindergartners as her people. "Thank you for telling me that," Marcus said. "Detective Webb, why do you care so much? I've talked to a lot of police over the years. Most of them were professional, did their jobs, but they didn't." She paused, searching for words. "They didn't carry Jennifer with them the way you do. Why?" Marcus thought about his own kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. He thought about how one person's attention can change everything. Because somebody has to. Somebody has to care about Jennifer as a person, not just as a victim. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? Ruth reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Find him. Please, find whoever did this. I will." And Marcus believed it now, in a way he hadn't quite believed it before. He wasn't just investigating a cold case. He was honoring a life. He was making sure that April baby who'd looked at her mother with recognition, that 8-year-old who'd comforted crying children, that 26-year-old teacher who'd taped drawings to her refrigerator, he was making sure she got justice. Traverse City was beautiful in late October, the trees showing their last spectacular colors before winter stripped them bare. Chen lived in a small house near the bay, the kind of place retirees move to for the water views and quiet streets. Marcus didn't knock on Chen's door. Instead, he walked the neighborhood, introducing himself to neighbors as someone looking into an old case. Most people barely knew Chen. He kept to himself, they said. Walked his dog every morning, picked up his newspaper, waved, but didn't chat. But one neighbor, an elderly woman named Barbara, who lived 3 houses down, remembered something. "David's a strange one," she said, standing on her front porch with a sweater pulled tight. "Doesn't have any visitors, no family that I've ever seen. But sometimes late at night, I've heard him talking in his yard, like he's having a conversation with someone, but there's never anyone there." Talking to himself? Maybe, or on the phone. But it's always the same. He sounds upset, apologetic almost. I asked him once if everything was okay, and he got very defensive, said it was none of my business. Marcus thanked her and walked back to his car. People talking to themselves wasn't a crime. But combined with Chen's reaction on the phone, combined with his knowledge of details he shouldn't have known, combined with his sudden disappearance from Jennifer's case after 6 months of dedicated involvement, it painted a picture. Not proof. Not yet. But a pattern. 2 weeks later, the DNA results came back. Marcus was at his desk when the call came in. He'd been working on other cases. The cold case unit had dozens of files that needed attention. But Jennifer Morrison was never far from his mind. He'd taped her photo to his computer monitor. 26 years old, smiling, believing she had a future. "Detective Webb?" The lab technician sounded excited. "You're going to want to sit down for this." Marcus was already sitting, but he gripped the edge of his desk. "Tell me." "The DNA from the coffee cup. We got a profile, male, and we got a hit." Marcus's heart was pounding. "A hit in CODIS?" "No. Genealogical database. We ran it through one of the consumer ancestry services, and we got a familial match. 3rd cousins on the paternal side. From there, we built out a family tree, narrowed down the possibilities. Only one person fits the age range and geographic location." "Who?" "David Chen." Marcus felt the world tilt. He'd suspected, but having confirmation was different. Chen had been in Jennifer's car. Chen had left his DNA on a coffee cup. And then Chen had inserted himself into the investigation, playing the concerned volunteer,
while all along he knew exactly what had happened to Jennifer Morrison. There's more, the lab technician continued. We sent the profile to other states, just to see. We got 2 more hits. Familial matches to unsolved cases in Ohio and Indiana. Both women, both disappeared in the mid-1980s. Both cases went cold. Jesus, Marcus breathed. He's a serial offender. Looks like it. We're working on getting direct DNA confirmation, but the familial matches are strong. Detective, I think you've got a serial killer. Marcus sat in his car in the station parking lot for 10 minutes after hanging up, just breathing. This was bigger than Jennifer Morrison now. This was 3 women, maybe more. This was a man who'd been killing for decades and had never been caught. But the DNA evidence was circumstantial. It placed Chen in Jennifer's car, but a defense attorney could argue contamination, could argue the cup had been handled by multiple people, could create reasonable doubt. Marcus needed more. He needed a confession. Or he needed a body. He called Ruth Morrison. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding tired. Mrs. Morrison, it's Detective Webb. I need to ask you something. After Jennifer disappeared, did David Chen ever come to your house? Yes, several times. Why? Did he ever use the bathroom? Did he ever eat or drink anything? Ruth was quiet, thinking. He drank coffee with me, sat at my kitchen table, right where you sat. He held my hand and told me not to give up hope. Marcus closed his eyes. Mrs. Morrison, I think I know what happened to Jennifer, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Have you found her? Not yet, but I'm close. I promise you, I'm close. The arrest came on a Thursday morning in November, almost exactly 36 years after Jennifer Morrison disappeared. Marcus had assembled a team, his captain, 2 other detectives, a forensic psychologist who specialized in interviewing suspects. They'd gotten a warrant based on the DNA evidence, the statements from 1987, the pattern of behavior. They'd coordinated with authorities in Ohio and Indiana. If David Chen had killed 3 women, maybe he'd killed more. Maybe he'd tell them everything, or maybe he'd say nothing. That was always a possibility. They knocked on Chen's door at 7 a.m. He answered in a bathrobe, looking older than his 70 years. His hair was completely white. His face was lined with decades of hard living, though Marcus wondered how much of that was guilt. David Chen, I have a warrant for your arrest for the murder of Jennifer Morrison. Chen didn't look surprised. He looked relieved. Can I get dressed? He asked quietly. Yes. Detective Rodriguez will accompany you. While Chen dressed, Marcus stood in the living room and looked around. The house was neat, sparse. No photographs on the walls, no personal touches. It was the home of someone who was just marking time, waiting. On a bookshelf, Marcus saw a photo album. He opened it carefully, using a gloved hand. Inside were newspaper clippings, articles about Jennifer Morrison's disappearance, articles about 2 other women. Melissa Tran from Toledo, disappeared 1984. Susan Woodward from Fort Wayne, disappeared 1986. The clippings were organized chronologically, preserved in plastic sleeves like something precious. Chen appeared in the doorway, dressed in slacks and a button-down shirt. He saw Marcus looking at the album. I kept them, Chen said. I needed to remember. Remember what? That they mattered, that they were real people. At the station, Chen waived his right to an attorney. The forensic psychologist, Dr. Sarah Kim, advised against this, but Chen insisted. I'm 70 years old, he said. I'm tired, and I want to tell the truth. They sat in an interrogation room, Marcus, Chen, Dr. Kim, and a video camera recording everything. Marcus read Chen his Miranda rights again, made sure Chen understood, got his confirmation on tape. Then Chen started talking. He'd been an only child, he said, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and barely noticed him. He'd grown up lonely, awkward, unable to connect with other people. In his 20s, he'd discovered he could fake it, could pretend to be normal, could say the right things, could smile at the right times. But inside, he always felt separate, isolated, different. "When did you first hurt someone?" Dr. Kim asked, her voice gentle. "I was 32. A woman named Melissa. I'd seen her at a coffee shop in Toledo. She smiled at me, made small talk while we waited for our orders. I thought maybe she understood me, that maybe she could see who I really was and didn't mind. But she didn't understand you," Dr. Kim said. Chen shook his head. "I followed her one night, just to watch her, to understand her. And then, something in me broke. Or maybe it was always broken. I just couldn't control it anymore." Marcus made himself stay quiet, letting Dr. Kim guide the interview. She was trained for this, to get confessions that would hold up in court, to extract details that only the killer would know. "Tell me about Jennifer Morrison," Dr. Kim said. Chen's expression changed, became softer. Jennifer was kind. She taught kindergarten. She cared about people. "How did you know her?" "I didn't, really. I'd seen her at parent-teacher conferences. My nephew was in her class. Kevin Hendricks. I went with my brother Tom because Kevin's mother had died the year before, and Tom was overwhelmed. Jennifer was so patient with Kevin, so gentle. I thought if I could be close to her, maybe some of that goodness would rub off on me." "So you followed her?" "Yes, for weeks. I learned her routine, when she stayed late at school, where she lived, what kind of car she drove. I didn't plan to hurt her. I just wanted to be near her." "But you did hurt her," Dr. Kim said, still gentle. Chen nodded. "November 19th. I knew she had parent-teacher conferences. I knew she'd be leaving late. I parked near the school and waited. When she came out, I approached her in the parking lot, said my car wouldn't start, asked if she could give me a ride to a gas station." Marcus felt sick. The oldest trick, the plea for help. She said yes. Of course she said yes. Jennifer helped people. That's who she was. Chen's voice cracked. We drove toward the highway. I had coffee. I'd brought 2 cups, said I'd gotten one for her as a thank you. She drank it while she drove. We talked about her students, about teaching. She was so alive, so full of plans. The coffee was drugged, Dr. Kim said. Yes, just enough to make her drowsy. When she started to realize something was wrong, I told her to pull over. Told her I'd drive her to the hospital. She was scared but still trusting, still believing I was trying to help. "Where did you take her?" "A cabin, northern Michigan near Cadillac. My uncle's place. He'd died 2 years before, left it to me. Nobody knew about it. Nobody ever went there." Marcus couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Is that where she died?" Chen looked at him directly for the first time. "Yes, 2 days later. I kept her there, kept thinking maybe she'd understand, maybe she'd see I wasn't a monster. But she was terrified. She begged me to let her go, said her mother would be worried, said her students needed her. But you didn't let her go." "I couldn't. She knew who I was. She'd seen my face. And more than that, I couldn't let her leave because then the fantasy would be over. As long as she was there, I could pretend we were connected, that she was there by choice." "How did she die?" Marcus forced himself to ask. "I gave her too much of the sedative. I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to sleep, to stop being afraid. But her breathing got shallow,
and then it stopped. I tried to revive her. I called 911 and then hung up before they answered because I knew what I'd done. She died in my arms, and I told her I was sorry. The room was silent. Marcus felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. "Where is she now?" he asked. "Buried on the property, near a birch tree with a split trunk. I visit her every year on the anniversary. I bring flowers. I tell her about her students growing up, about her mother who never stopped looking. I tell her I'm sorry, even though sorry doesn't mean anything." "And the others? Melissa Tran? Susan Woodward?" "Melissa is in Toledo, in the woods behind Wildwood Preserve. Susan is in Fort Wayne, in a park near the St. Mary's River. I can show you exactly where. I remember everything. I've carried them with me every day for 36 years. Dr. Kim glanced at Marcus. They had what they needed: a full confession, locations of bodies, details only the killer would know. "Why did you help with Jennifer's search?" Marcus asked. "Why insert yourself into the investigation?" Chen's smile was sad. "Because I needed to know she mattered, that people cared, that her life meant something beyond what I'd done to it. And because—" he paused, struggling. "Because I wanted to be caught. Part of me always wanted to be caught. But I was too much of a coward to confess, so I left clues. I called in tips. I showed up at the station. I waited for someone to see through me. It took 36 years, Marcus said. I know. I'm sorry for that too." They found Jennifer Morrison's body exactly where David Chen said it would be, near a birch tree with a split trunk, on property that had been abandoned for decades, so overgrown with brush and saplings that it took a team of investigators 2 days to locate the grave. She was wrapped in a blue tarp, buried shallow, but covered carefully. Chen had preserved her dignity even in death. Her clothes were intact, her hands folded across her chest. After 36 years in the ground, there wasn't much left to identify visually, but dental records confirmed it. Jennifer Morrison had been found. Ruth Morrison was 80 years old when Marcus came to her door with the news. She'd been waiting for this moment for 36 years, but Marcus could see that knowing didn't make it easier. "She's gone," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. She'd known Jennifer was dead for decades, but knowing and having confirmation were different continents of grief. "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry." Ruth nodded slowly. "Can I see her?" "There's not much to see, after this long. But you can be there when we bring her home. We're arranging transport now. I want her buried next to Dale, her father. He never got to know what happened. He died thinking she might still be out there somewhere. We'll make sure that happens." Ruth walked to her refrigerator, looked at the children's drawings that had been there for 36 years. "Will you help me take these down?" she asked. "I think it's time." Marcus spent an hour with Ruth, carefully peeling away the tape, preserving each drawing. Ruth told him about everyone, which student had made it, what Jennifer had said about their personality, which ones had gone on to have children of their own who were now kindergarten age. "Jennifer's students are in their 40s now," Ruth said. "Some of them have reached out over the years, sent cards, told me Jennifer changed their lives. One of them became a teacher because of her. Another one said Jennifer was the first adult who ever made him feel valued." "She made a difference," Marcus said. "She did. And then someone took her away." Ruth looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Do you know why? Did he tell you why?" Marcus thought about Chen's confession, about his talk of loneliness and connection and fantasies. He said he wanted to feel close to her, that he thought she could make him better.
That's not a reason. That's an excuse. You're right. There is no reason. There's no reason that makes sense. Ruth folded the last drawing and placed it in a box. What happens now? To him? He'll plead guilty. The prosecutor says he'll get life without parole. He's 70 years old. He'll die in prison. Good. Ruth's voice was fierce. I hope he lives a long time. I hope he has years to think about what he did. Mrs. Morrison, there's something you should know. Chen kept newspaper clippings about Jennifer. He visited her grave every year. He said he wanted to be caught, that he left clues hoping someone would figure it out. Ruth's expression hardened. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me he cared. Caring is what mothers do. Caring is waiting 36 years for answers. Caring is keeping your daughter's room untouched because you can't bear to erase her. He didn't care. He was selfish. That's all he ever was. Marcus nodded. She was right. Whatever Chen felt, it wasn't care. It was possession. It was control. It was the opposite of love. The trial took 8 months to organize, though it was largely a formality. David Chen pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder: Jennifer Morrison, Melissa Tran, and Susan Woodward. The prosecution had agreed not to seek the death penalty in exchange for his full cooperation and the locations of the bodies. Melissa Tran had been found in Toledo, just as Chen described. Susan Woodward had been found in Fort Wayne. Both women had been buried with the same care Chen had shown Jennifer, wrapped, hands folded, dignity preserved in death, if not in life. The courtroom was packed for the sentencing hearing. Ruth Morrison sat in the front row with her daughter Amy, who'd flown in from Seattle. Behind them were the families of Melissa Tran and Susan Woodward, united in grief across decades and state lines. Marcus sat in the back, watching. He'd been invited to sit with the families. He'd solved the case after all. But this moment wasn't about him. This was for the families, for the women who'd been taken, for the justice that had come too late, but had come nonetheless. Chen was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He looked smaller than Marcus remembered, diminished. 70 years old and facing the rest of his life in a cell. The judge asked if anyone wanted to make a statement before sentencing. Ruth Morrison stood. She was 80 now, walking with a cane, but her voice was steady. Your Honor, I've waited 36 years to stand in this room. 36 years to look at the man who killed my daughter and tell him what he took from us. Ruth turned to face Chen. He looked at her, then looked away. You took my daughter when she was 26 years old. She would be 62 now. She'd probably be a grandmother. She'd probably be retired from teaching, but still volunteering, still finding ways to help children. She'd be here with me, holding my hand, helping me through my old age the way children do for their parents. Ruth's voice cracked but didn't break. You took all of that. You took her wedding day. You took her future children. You took the students she would have taught, the lives she would have touched. You took 36 years of her mother loving her, celebrating her birthdays, calling her on the phone just to hear her voice. Tears were streaming down Ruth's face now, but she kept going. You don't get to say you cared about her. You don't get to say you visited her grave and felt sorry. Sorry is what you say when you bump into someone in the grocery store. What you did to Jennifer, to Melissa, to Susan. There's no word for that. There's no apology big enough. Chen was crying now too, his head bowed. I hope you live a very long time, Ruth said. I hope you wake up every day in that cell and remember what you did. I hope you feel every single day of the life sentence you're about to receive. And I hope that when you finally die, Jennifer's face is the last thing you see." Ruth sat down. Amy wrapped her arms around her mother. The families of Melissa Tran and Susan Woodward also spoke, their words echoing Ruth's. Grief, anger, a desire for justice, even though justice could never bring back what was lost. When they finished, the judge looked at Chen. "Do you have anything to say?" Chen stood slowly. "I can't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want the families to know that I remember. I remember everything about Jennifer, about Melissa, about Susan. I remember their voices and their kindness and the way they tried to help me even when they should have been protecting themselves. I remember that they were good people and I was not. I carry that every day." The judge's expression was cold. "David Chen, you are sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. That is not justice for what you've done. True justice would be impossible, but it is the closest we can come." Chen was led away. Marcus watched the family's embrace, watched Ruth Morrison cry tears that were somehow both grief and relief. It was over. Not finished. Grief never finishes. But this chapter was closed. Jennifer Morrison was buried on a cold December day, next to her father in Holland's Pilgrim Home Cemetery. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, her family, her former students who were now middle-aged with children of their own, teachers who had worked with her, community members who remembered. The day was overcast, threatening snow but holding back. Marcus thought that was appropriate somehow. Grief suspended between falling and holding, between release and restraint. He arrived early, before the crowds, and stood at the gravesite watching the workers prepare. They moved with practiced efficiency, setting up chairs, arranging flowers. They did this every day, Marcus realized. Every day, someone's loved one came home to rest. Every day, families gathered to say goodbye. The workers probably didn't think about the mathematics of it. How many hearts were breaking? How many futures were being reimagined without the person being buried? But Marcus thought about it. He always did. Ruth arrived with Amy, both dressed in black. Ruth looked smaller than she had a month ago, as if the weight of finally knowing had compressed her somehow. Or maybe it was just that she'd been holding herself upright for 36 years through sheer force of will, and now that she didn't have to anymore, her body was remembering how to rest. Marcus approached them quietly. "Mrs. Morrison." "Amy." Ruth looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Thank you for coming, Detective." "I needed to be here." Marcus paused, unsure how to say what he wanted to say. "Jennifer's last words were about you. She told Chen to tell you she loved you." Ruth's face crumpled. Amy caught her mother as she swayed. "She thought of me? At the end?" "She did. She wanted you to know she loved you." Ruth pressed her hand to her mouth, tears streaming. "All these years, I wondered if she knew how much I loved her. If she died knowing. Thank you, Detective. Thank you for telling me that." The funeral was scheduled to start at 11. By 10:45, every chair was filled, and people stood in rows behind, huddled in coats against the December cold. Marcus stood at the back, watching. This was Jennifer's day, not Chen's, not even the investigation's. This was the day Jennifer came home. The service began with a reading from Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," and Marcus found himself mouthing the words his grandmother had taught him decades ago. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." He wondered if Jennifer had feared evil in those last moments. He hoped not. He hoped the sedative had made her sleepy, confused,
not fully aware of what was happening. But he suspected that wasn't true. Chen had said she begged to go home, begged to see her mother. She'd known. She'd been terrified. And there was no comfort in pretending otherwise. The pastor spoke about Jennifer's life, her love of teaching, her dedication to children, her belief that everyone deserved kindness. He told stories about her volunteer work at the church, how she'd organized a children's reading program, how she'd stayed after services to help elderly members carry their groceries to their cars. Jennifer Morrison saw people, the pastor said, really saw them. In a world that often looks past those who need help most, Jennifer stopped and paid attention. She made people feel valued. That was her gift, and though her life was cut short, that gift continues to echo through every person she touched. Then Ruth had arranged for Jennifer's kindergarten students, the ones from 1987, now in their 40s, to speak at the service. One by one, they stood at the podium and shared memories. Marcus watched as a woman in her mid-40s approached the microphone. She introduced herself as Christine Parker, formerly Christine Hayes. "Miss Morrison taught me to read," Christine said, her voice shaking slightly. "I was struggling, and she stayed after school with me every day for a month, going through phonics, never getting frustrated. She made me believe I was smart. When I finally read my first book all by myself," she cried. Actual tears. She was that happy for me. Christine paused, collecting herself. "I became a teacher because of her. I teach second grade now, and every time I have a student who's struggling, I think about Miss Morrison's patience, about how she never made me feel stupid or slow. She just kept believing in me until I believed in myself." A man stepped up next. His name was James Chen, no relation to David, and he looked uncomfortable in his suit, kept tugging at his collar. "Miss Morrison noticed I never had lunch," James said quietly. "My parents were going through a rough time. Money was tight. I was embarrassed, tried to hide it. But Miss Morrison knew. She started keeping extra sandwiches in her desk drawer. She never made a big deal about it, never made me feel poor or ashamed. She'd just say, 'James, I packed too much for lunch again. Would you like a sandwich?' Like she was the one doing me a favor by not wasting food." James's voice broke. "That kindness saved me, not just from being hungry, though it did that too, but from feeling invisible, from feeling like nobody cared. Miss Morrison cared. She saw me. She made sure I knew I mattered." One after another, they came forward, each with a story, each with evidence that Jennifer Morrison's 26 years on Earth had mattered immeasurably. Sarah Walsh told about the time Jennifer had noticed bruises on her arms and had quietly, carefully, asked if everything was okay at home. When Sarah had broken down crying and confessed her father was drinking again, hitting her mother, sometimes hitting her, Jennifer had held her hand and helped her find help. Sarah was now a social worker, specializing in domestic violence cases. Michael Torres talked about being the only Latino kid in his class in 1987, feeling different and alone. Jennifer had learned some Spanish phrases just for him, greeted him in Spanish every morning, made him feel like his heritage was something to be proud of rather than hide. Michael now ran a bilingual education program. The stories went on, each one building a portrait of a woman who'd seen teaching not as a job, but as a calling, who'd understood that kindergarten wasn't just about learning letters and numbers. It was about learning to see yourself as worthy, as capable, as deserving of attention and care. When the last student finished speaking, there was a long silence. Then, without any signal Marcus could detect, the entire group of former students stood as one. They walked to the casket, each placing a hand on it briefly.
a gesture of goodbye, a gesture of gratitude, a gesture that said, "We carry you forward." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was what Chen had destroyed. Not just one life, but this community of love, this ripple effect of goodness. Every child Jennifer would have taught after 1987, every parent she would have counseled, every life she would have touched. The mathematics of murder weren't just about the victim. They were about everyone who would have known them, loved them, been changed by them. As the service concluded and people began filing past the casket to pay their respects, Marcus noticed a small boy, maybe 7 years old, tugging on his mother's sleeve. The mother was Christine Parker, the teacher who'd struggled to read. "Mom," the boy said, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Who was Miss Morrison?" Christine knelt down to her son's level. "She was my teacher when I was your age. She's the reason I became a teacher. She's the reason I read you bedtime stories every night and never get impatient when you ask questions." So she was important? She was very important, honey. She changed my life. Which means, in a way, she's part of your life too, even though you never met her. The boy thought about this seriously, the way children do when they're trying to understand something big. "Then I'm glad she was here." "Me too, baby. Me too." Marcus turned away, wiping his eyes. This was the real ending to Jennifer Morrison's story. Not David Chen in a prison cell. Not even the trial or the conviction. This. Children growing up with the benefit of kindness that Jennifer had started decades ago. Teachers teaching the way Jennifer had taught them. Love multiplying across generations. That was what won, in the end. Not death, not evil, but love that refused to be extinguished. When the service ended and the crowd dispersed, Marcus found himself alone at the graveside with Ruth. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up, for caring. I promised you I would hope for both of us. And you did." Ruth looked at her daughter's headstone, simple, elegant, with dates that spanned only 26 years. It's not enough, is it? A name on a stone, a grave to visit. It doesn't bring her back. No, ma'am, it doesn't. But it's something. It's truth. It's acknowledgement. It's the world saying Jennifer Morrison existed and her life mattered. Ruth wiped her eyes. That has to be enough, because it's all we get. They stood in silence for a while, the winter wind cold against their faces. "What will you do now?" Ruth asked. "I have other cases, other families waiting for answers." "Then go give them answers. Don't let anyone else wait 36 years. Marcus nodded. He stayed at the grave for a few more minutes after Ruth left, just looking at Jennifer's name carved in stone. 26 years old, a teacher, a daughter, a person who'd made the world better just by being in it. He thought about all the cases in his cold case files, all the families still waiting, all the people who deserved the same closure Ruth Morrison had finally received. And he made a promise, there at Jennifer Morrison's grave, that he would find them. He would give them answers. He would make sure their loved ones weren't forgotten. It was the only kind of justice he could offer, but it was something. And sometimes, something was enough. 5 years later, Marcus Webb retired from the Holland Police Department. In his decade with the cold case unit, he'd solved 17 cases. 17 families finally got answers. 17 people came home. Jennifer Morrison's case became Marcus's last. Not because he stopped investigating after her, he worked for another 4 years, but because she was the one who taught him what the job really meant. It wasn't about statistics or clearance rates or medals. It was about the woman in the photograph, smiling at the camera, believing she had a future. It was about making sure she mattered. Ruth Morrison died in 2028, at the age of 85. She lived 5 years past Jennifer's resolution, long enough to see Chen imprisoned, long enough to visit her daughter's grave every week, long enough to watch as one of Jennifer's former students named her own daughter Jennifer in honor of the teacher who'd changed her life. At Ruth's funeral, Amy stood at the podium and spoke about her mother's strength. "She never gave up," Amy said. "For 36 years, she carried hope like a weight and never set it down. She taught me that love is stronger than death, that persistence matters, that fighting for justice, even when it seems impossible, is worth it." The kindergarten class from 1987, now in their late 40s, attended Ruth's funeral. They'd stayed in touch over the years, bonded by shared memory and shared loss. They told stories about Miss Morrison, about Ruth, about how one family's tragedy had touched all their lives. "I think about Miss Morrison every time I teach," one woman said. "I think about how she saw me, really saw me, when I was 5 years old and struggling. I try to do that for my students. I try to be someone they'll remember." That's Jennifer Morrison's legacy, Marcus thought, watching from the back of the church. Not the way she died, but the way she lived. Not the horror of her ending, but the beauty of her beginning and middle. Not the monster who took her, but the children she saved, and the love she gave, and the light she brought to the world. After the funeral, Marcus visited Jennifer's grave one last time. The grass had grown over it now, and someone had planted flowers, bright yellow daffodils that bloomed every spring. "I kept my promise," Marcus said to the gravestone. "You mattered. Everyone knows you mattered. Your students remember you. Your mother never forgot you. The world is better because you were in it." The wind blew through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the trees. Somewhere in the distance, Marcus heard children playing, their laughter carrying across the air. He liked to think Jennifer would have loved that sound. He walked back to his car, past rows of gravestones, each one marking a life lived and lost, each one representing someone who mattered to someone, each one a story waiting to be remembered. Marcus Webb had spent 11 years listening to those stories, honoring those lives, bringing answers to families who'd waited too long. It had cost him his marriage and his peace of mind and hundreds of sleepless nights, but it had also given him purpose. It had shown him that justice, however imperfect, however delayed, still meant something. He got in his car and drove away from the cemetery, past the elementary school where Jennifer had taught, past the house where Ruth had waited, past all the places that held memories of a woman he'd never met, but had come to love anyway. That's the strange gift of cold cases. You fall in love with ghosts. You give them your time and your heart and your hope. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you give them justice too. Jennifer Morrison got her justice. Ruth Morrison got her answers. David Chen got his punishment. And Marcus Webb got to be the person who made it happen. That was enough. It had to be enough. Because in the end, this was never about perfect justice or complete healing or erasing the horror of what happened. It was about acknowledgement. It was about saying, Jennifer Morrison existed. She was loved. She mattered. And when she was taken, the world noticed. The world cared. The world fought to bring her home. That's all any of us can hope for. To be seen, to be valued, to be remembered. Jennifer Morrison was all of those things, and she still is. In 2029, the kindergarten class from 1987 established a scholarship fund in Jennifer Morrison's name. It provides full college tuition for students pursuing degrees in education. The first recipient was a young woman whose grandmother had been one of Jennifer's students. "Miss Morrison changed my grandmother's life," the scholarship recipient said at the award ceremony. "And through my grandmother, she changed mine. I'm going to be a teacher because of her, because she proved that one person really can make a difference." Ruth Morrison would have loved that. Jennifer Morrison would have loved that. And somewhere, in a prison cell in Michigan, David Chen read about the scholarship in the newspaper and wept. Not because he was sorry, though he claimed to be, but because he finally understood what he'd destroyed. Not just one life, but all the lives that life would have touched, all the students Jennifer would have taught, all the children who would have been inspired by her, all the love she would have given and received. That's the mathematics of murder. You don't just kill one person. You kill their future. You kill everyone who would have known them and loved them and been changed by them. You kill possibility itself. David Chen would spend the rest of his life understanding that mathematics, and Marcus Webb took some small comfort in knowing that Chen would carry that weight until his dying day. Justice isn't perfect. It can't restore what's been taken, but it can ensure that the taking is acknowledged, condemned, punished. It can ensure that victims are honored and remembered and celebrated for who they were, not how they died. Jennifer Morrison was a teacher. She was a daughter. She was a friend. She collected her students' drawings and taped them to her refrigerator. She stayed late to help struggling readers. She believed in the goodness of people, even when that belief made her vulnerable. She was 26 years old when she was taken. She would be 63 now. But she will always be 26 in the memories of those who loved her. Always smiling, always kind, always believing that tomorrow would come, that her students would learn, that the world was a place worth trusting. David Chen took her tomorrow, but he couldn't take her yesterday. He couldn't erase the good she did, or the love she gave, or the lives she changed. That belongs to Jennifer Morrison alone. And that, Marcus Webb believed, was the truest kind of justice. Not revenge, not even punishment, but memory, acknowledgement, the refusal to let a victim be defined by their victimhood. Jennifer Morrison was a teacher who made children believe they were smart and capable and worthy of love. That's who she was. That's who she is. That's who she will always be. Everything else, the horror, the investigation, the trial, is just noise around the edges of a beautiful life. And in the end, that's all that matters. The life, the love, the light. Jennifer Morrison brought light to the world, and that light didn't die with her. It lives on in every student she taught, every person she touched, every life she changed. That's the real ending to this story. Not death, not justice, but love that refused to be extinguished. Love that endured 36 years of darkness and emerged still burning. Love that won